It was a typical afternoon in the quiet and peaceful town of Warren, Massachusetts. Lauren Ashley, an 18-year-old high school graduate, was finishing another day of work at the local mall. The warm July air was heavy, but nothing hinted at the imminent terror. Lauren, as usual, had made plans to meet her friends after work. They were always waiting for her call around 6:30 p.m., but this time that call never came. As the hours passed, her friends grew restless. They tried contacting Lauren several times, but her phone remained silent. This was strange, considering they were always in touch. Worried, they tried again, now with an unsettling feeling growing in their chests. Meanwhile, Lauren's father began to wonder why she hadn't stopped by his house after work, as she had planned. He knew something was wrong. Desperate, Lauren's father reached out to her friends, and together, they went to the local police. The small town was peaceful, with no history of major crimes, and the disappearance of such a promising young woman quickly mobilized the authorities. The search began immediately, with police, friends, and volunteers scouring streets, parks, and abandoned areas. A mix of anxiety and fear hovered over everyone, like a dark cloud approaching. That night, one of Lauren's friends reported seeing her car, a red Jeep, parked near a deserted beach by a lake. Police rushed to the scene. The Jeep was there with the windows partially rolled down. Inside, they found Lauren's phone, purse, and laptop all abandoned. There were no signs of struggle, nothing to suggest she had left the car willingly. Just the disturbing absence of her presence. Lauren's father arrived at the beach soon after the police. His heart racing, he ran toward the lake, calling her name as he waded into the cold water, desperate to find her. But there was nothing, just emptiness. Investigators began searching the area around the car. They found a single clue, Lauren's keys, tossed into a nearby storm drain. It seemed like a deliberate act, but what did it all mean? Lauren's friends, paralyzed by fear and disbelief, refused to leave the beach. By dawn, the mystery of Lauren's disappearance had only deepened. The beach where her car was found was now swarmed by police and search teams, combing through every inch of the surrounding area. The tranquility of Warren had been shattered, replaced by a growing sense of unease as the missing young woman became the town's sole focus. As investigators began questioning friends and family, one name came up repeatedly: Nathaniel, Lauren's ex-boyfriend. They had broken up only a few months prior, and according to her close friends, the breakup hadn't been easy for him. Nathaniel was a constant presence in conversations about Lauren, and her friends were concerned. He hadn't taken the split well. Detectives knew they needed to talk to him. That afternoon, the police went to Nathaniel's house. He answered the door calmly, almost too calmly. He claimed he had spent the previous night watching movies with his mother and hadn't seen Lauren since the breakup. His mother confirmed the story, stating that Nathaniel had been home the entire time. However, something about Nathaniel's demeanor seemed off. While he had an emotional connection to Lauren, his detachment from the situation raised red flags. The investigators, though lacking solid evidence, kept Nathaniel on their radar. They needed something more concrete. Meanwhile, Lauren was still missing, and with every passing second, her family and friends' anxiety intensified. It was as if time was suspended, trapped in a fog of uncertainty and terror. Then, a new lead emerged: Lauren's phone records. As they traced the calls and messages sent before her disappearance, detectives uncovered something peculiar. On the night she vanished, Lauren had sent Nathaniel a one-word text, "Here." There was also a record of a phone call between them, just minutes before she disappeared. This information dramatically shifted the investigation. The detectives returned to Nathaniel's house. This time, they confronted him with the new discoveries. Initially, he tried to maintain his composure, but the tension on his face was undeniable. After a brief silence, he admitted that Lauren had indeed stopped by his house that night. He said they talked briefly, but she hadn't gotten out of her car. They only discussed their relationship, and, according to him, she left soon after. This revelation sent the investigation into a whirlwind of new questions. Why hadn't Nathaniel mentioned this before? What else was he hiding? And yet, his eerie calmness continued to puzzle the detectives. He seemed unbothered, as if detached from the gravity of the situation. Investigators now had more reason to suspect him, but they still lacked the evidence needed to arrest him. Rumors began swirling around the town. Nathaniel, once a beloved figure, the third day after Lauren's disappearance marked a devastating turning point. As the investigation continued, the tension in the small town of Juan grew unbearable. Families kept their doors locked, and the fear that something horrible had happened to the young woman consumed the community. But that morning, a cyclist, out for a ride along the river, would make a grim discovery. As she pedaled along the isolated marshland, something unusual caught her eye near the water's edge. At first, she thought it was just a piece of driftwood or trash carried by the river. But as she got closer, she realized it was something far more sinister. A body, partially submerged, tangled in the branches extending into the water. Her heart raced as she immediately called the police, unable to believe what she had just seen. The news spread like wildfire. Police and forensic teams arrived quickly, cordoning off the area. The body was retrieved from the water. It didn't take long for confirmation. It was Lauren Ashley. The discovery cast a veil of mourning and horror over the town. The young woman, who had vanished without a trace, had resurfaced in a tragic and horrifying scene. Lauren's body showed clear signs of violence. An elastic bungee cord, like those used for securing car trunks, was wrapped around her neck. Initial examinations suggested the cause of death was strangulation, but there was also a deep cut, indicating a violent struggle. Her nails were broken, and there were defensive wounds on her hands and arms, proof that she had fought her attacker until the very end. With the discovery of Lauren's body, the investigation officially turned into a homicide case. Detectives knew they had to act fast. Time was running out to gather the evidence needed to catch the killer. And at the center of their suspicions remained Nathaniel, the one person with both motive and opportunity. As Lauren's body was taken for autopsy, the detectives returned to the scene where her car had been found. This time, they expanded their search area, hoping to uncover something they might have missed earlier. It didn't take long for a new clue to emerge: a blood-stained towel, partially hidden in the bushes near where Lauren's body had been discovered. The towel was sent for analysis immediately, but the police already had an unsettling feeling that this was the turning point in the case. They needed to confront Nathaniel once more. What would he say now that Lauren's body had been found and new evidence was starting to pile up? The town, still grappling with the shock of Lauren's brutal death, was now filled with unanswered questions. The police With the confirmation of Lauren's death, detectives intensified their focus on Nathaniel. His distant behavior and the inconsistencies in his story were no longer just suspicious. They were indicators of something far darker. But the investigation still needed concrete evidence to secure an arrest. The pieces were coming together, and the walls around Nathaniel were closing in. The blood-stained towel found near Lauren's body was sent for testing, and the results were quick and damning. The blood belonged to Lauren. This discovery escalated the urgency of the investigation. Forensic teams also began examining Nathaniel's car, and what they found was alarming. Using luminol, a chemical that detects traces of blood, they discovered that the trunk had been recently cleaned, but faint traces of blood remained in the carpet fibers. Once again, the tests confirmed it was Lauren's blood. The detectives returned to Nathaniel's home, this time with a search warrant. Their objective was clear: find something that would definitively link him to the crime. In the garage, they quickly noticed something disturbing. Several bungee cords were found, identical to the one used to strangle Lauren. The forensic team cataloged them carefully, noting the connection. But the most significant discovery was yet to come. In the corner of the garage, next to old boxes and tools, there was a duffel bag that seemed out of place. When they opened it, the investigators found clothes caked in dirt and blood, as well as a pair of sneakers stained with what looked like mud and dried blood. The items were sent to the lab, but the police already had a sinking feeling that this was the case's turning point. As forensic evidence piled up, detectives learned more about Nathaniel and Lauren's relationship. Mutual friends began to talk about Nathaniel's obsessive behavior after the breakup. He followed her, showed up unannounced at events, and was seen several times drunk, pleading with her to reconsider the split. At a graduation party just a few months before her death, Nathaniel had caused a scene, confronting Lauren aggressively and creating a disturbance. Investigators then recalled a crucial detail: the last phone call between Lauren and Nathaniel. He had initially omitted the conversation, and now, with Lauren's body found and evidence mounting, Nathaniel's narrative was crumbling. When questioned again, he remained calm, but it was clear his alibi was falling apart. Nathaniel's mother, who had claimed he was home the entire evening, now remembered leaving the house briefly to run errands, during the exact time Lauren had disappeared. The walls were closing in fast, and Nathaniel had nowhere left to run. Despite this, he remained eerily calm, almost indifferent. The next few days would be critical, and with each new piece of evidence, the case against Nathaniel became stronger. Meanwhile, the town of Juan, still in shock over tension hung thick in the air of Juan. With each new revelation, the suspicions surrounding Nathaniel solidified, and the mystery of Lauren's death was beginning to take an even more terrifying shape. However, one crucial piece was still missing: a confession. Despite the mountain of evidence, Nathaniel continued to maintain his cold, composed demeanor. But for the detectives, the noose was tightening. The pressure on Nathaniel mounted when the results of the bloodstained towel were delivered. In addition to Lauren's blood, traces of Nathaniel's DNA were also found, directly connecting him to the crime. Armed with this evidence, the police returned to Nathaniel's home for what they hoped would be the final confrontation. This time, when they were met by his parents, the tension was palpable. His mother, who had once staunchly defended her son, now showed signs of doubt and concern. She knew something wasn't right. The detectives called Nathaniel in for another conversation. This time, the approach was different. They confronted him with all the evidence. Lauren's blood on his shoes, the bungee cords in the garage, the stained clothes and sneakers, and the traces of blood in his car's trunk. Nathaniel, who had remained calm throughout the investigation, finally began to show signs of breaking. Small gestures, like rubbing his hands or avoiding eye contact, indicated that he was starting to feel the weight of the accusations. The silence in the room was oppressive until one of the detectives played his final card. The mention of the death penalty, a punishment still possible in the state. Nathaniel's face went pale, but he maintained control. Then, as if a dam had broken, he finally spoke. The confession came slowly, in fragments, but each word that left his mouth was like a hammer blow to those in the room. He began by claiming he never intended to kill Lauren. He said it all started as a desperate attempt to reconcile. On that fateful night, he had asked her to come over, hoping that seeing him in person might make her reconsider ending their relationship for good. According to Nathaniel, when Lauren arrived, they argued. Her words were harsh, making it clear there was no going back. She wanted to move on with her life, and he wasn't part of it. What happened next, Nathaniel said, was a blur of intense emotions. He described how, in a moment of rage and desperation, he grabbed her by the neck and, without thinking, used the bungee cord that was within reach. He claimed everything happened too quickly, that he didn't have time to reflect on what he was doing until it was too late. When he realized Lauren was dead, he panicked. Nathaniel then explained the cold and calculated sequence of events that followed. He cleaned up the crime scene, hid the body in his car's trunk, and drove to the beach where he abandoned the Jeep. Afterward, he carried her body to the marsh, believing the current would take care of the rest. But the guilt and fear consumed him, and every action he took felt like a desperate attempt to cover up what he had done, though it was all in vain. With the confession recorded, the detectives finally had what they needed. Nathaniel was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, and the town of Juan, still reeling from Lauren's death, now watched in disbelief as the case unfolded. The shock in the community was immediate. Those who had once known Nathaniel as the charismatic and popular young man now saw him in a new light, that of a desperate and disturbed killer. The town, once a symbol of tranquility, had become Welcome to Spooky Stories. I'm Milo, your guide through the chilling and the unknown. Here, we dive into terrifying tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Join our community of thrill seekers, and let's explore the darkness together. If you're curious about how I keep my concentration, efficiency, performance, and mental health at their peak every day, I'm going to share with you 2 resources that I use daily in my video creation routine. First, breathing for sleep. This method is essential for my deep, restful nights, ensuring I wake up refreshed and ready to create high-quality content. And the best part? It's super easy to incorporate into your routine. And then there's the 7 seconds at-home ritual. This ritual is backed by 4 neuroscience studies and helps to supercharge my brain power, keeping my focus sharp throughout the entire day. Want to try these resources and feel the difference in your routine? The links are right here in the video description and pinned in the comments. Don't miss this chance to elevate your productivity and mental well-being. Nathaniel's trial became a public spectacle. The courtroom was packed, not only with Lauren's grieving family but also with residents of Juan and reporters, all eager to witness the conclusion of the crime that had shaken the small town. The weeks following Nathaniel's arrest had been tense, with new revelations about his disturbing behavior surfacing. But now, justice was finally within reach. The prosecutor, in his opening argument, laid out the events with surgical precision. He presented the forensic evidence in detail. Lauren's blood on Nathaniel's sneakers, the cleanup marks in his car, the blood-stained towel, and, of course, the bungee cord that had been used to strangle her. Everything pointed to premeditation. It was the story of a young man obsessed, who, when denied what he wanted, decided to take the life of the woman he claimed to love. It was a dark, coherent narrative, built on a foundation of solid proof. Lauren's friends took the witness stand one by one, recounting how Nathaniel had changed over the last few months of their relationship. They described his obsession, growing jealousy, and episodes of verbal and emotional violence that had preceded the murder. There were moments when the courtroom fell into a heavy silence, as tears streamed down the faces of Lauren's family, reliving the last days of the young woman they had lost so cruelly. Nathaniel's defense took a different approach. They argued that he suffered from severe mental health issues, including deep depression and a possible predisposition to schizophrenia, a condition that ran in his family. They called psychologists to testify that Nathaniel had experienced a psychotic break at the time of the crime, claiming that he had no control over his actions. The defense painted a picture of a broken young man, lost in his own mind, unable to make rational decisions. But the prosecutors were relentless. Even if Nathaniel had been in a fragile mental state, they argued, the evidence showed that the crime had been meticulously planned. Nathaniel had called Lauren to his house, instructed her to park on another street, prepared the location for the confrontation, and then cleaned up the scene afterward. It was the behavior of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The most emotional moment of the trial came when Lauren's father, devastated by grief, was called to speak. He looked directly at Nathaniel, not with anger, but with a sadness so profound it weighed on everyone present. With a trembling voice, he said, "You took my daughter from me. You took the light she had, and there are no words in the world that can explain the pain this has caused." His words echoed through the courtroom, as many in the audience struggled to hold back tears. After days of testimonies, arguments, and evidence, the jury retired to deliberate. The hours that followed were filled with silent anxiety. Lauren's friends and family huddled together, feeling the weight of the weight. Nathaniel's fate was in the hands of 12 jurors, and their decision would determine the rest of his life. When the jury finally returned, the silence in the courtroom was so dense it felt impossible to breathe. The verdict was read in a firm voice: guilty of first-degree murder. Nathaniel was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The weight of the decision seemed to bring some closure to Lauren's family, but at the same time, there was no way to erase the pain they would carry for the rest of their lives. As Nathaniel was escorted out of the courtroom, he looked at his parents one last time. His mother wept, devastated, while his father kept his gaze fixed on the floor, unable to face the reality of what had happened. For the small town of Juan, the nightmare was finally over. But the scars from that crime would remain for a long time. The foundation created in Lauren's memory, led by her father, became a beacon in the community, promoting awareness of the dangers of abusive relationships and the devastating impact of domestic violence. Lauren Ashley's story would not be forgotten. Her life, cut short so brutally, now served as a somber reminder that danger can hide in those closest to us. And for those who loved her, only the memory of a vibrant young woman, full of life and dreams, remained, her voice still echoing, asking for justice amid the silence of tragedy. Now that you've uncovered the dark truth behind the story, it's time to reflect. How many situations like this are happening around you without your knowledge? Are you paying attention to the signs? Would you have made a different choice? This is your moment to act, to apply what you've learned, and to make a difference in your life and in the lives of those around you. What will you do with this knowledge? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear from you. And before you go, click on the video that's on the screen to dive even deeper into this world of mystery. Don't forget to subscribe to Spooky Stories and turn on notifications so you can keep learning with each new tale. Who knows, the next warning sign you spot might just save a life.